Hey everybody, this is the analysis video, character analysis for Hamlet Act 2. This video will probably be shorter than the other four in that one of the three characters that we are analyzing doesn't even appear or is not mentioned in this act. Alas, poor Horatio. We knew him well in Act 1, but we don't know him at all in Act 2. That wasn't that funny a joke. I just think I'm pretty clever. So we're going to talk pretty exclusively about Ophelia and Hamlet, and mostly about Hamlet. We don't get a lot about Ophelia yet. Act 3 and 4 is when we get the Ophelia show, and it's as equal or strong as the Hamlet show. So Act 2, Scene 1 is really all we get about Ophelia, and all we really learn about her from her 5 lines is that she's obedient, right? She's obedient. Her father told her, you reject Hamlet's letters and reject his love, and she says, I did just like as you said, my lord. But it also shows that she must at least trust her father to some extent, in that not only does she do what she's told, right? If she didn't trust her father, she would not be obedient, but also in the fact that when she is upset, she goes to her father to tell her boy troubles. I would assume that even though Laertes is away at Paris and Ophelia doesn't seem to have a mother of any kind, she has to have some friends, right, in and amongst Elsinore that she can confide in when she's having boy troubles. And the fact that she comes to her father to tell him about the crazy thing that just happened to her in regards to Hamlet indicates that she does trust him on some level. If she did not trust him, she would not come to him, and she wouldn't have even listened to him in the first place. You know, she may say that this happened, or just ignore it and hope that Polonius never asks her about it again. But she does it, and then she goes to her father when she's upset about the way Hamlet acted. So Ophelia, if we learn anything, we definitely learn that she's obedient, and we can infer that she trusts her father implicitly. So let's go to Act 2, Scene 2. This is a big one. This is all about Hamlet. Let's start with his antic disposition, his insanity. Hamlet is trying on different types of insanity. Act 2 takes place 2 months after he has confronted the ghost, right? Act 1, he says, my father has been dead for 2 months. And then, I forget if it's in this act or the next act, we learn that it's been 2 months since then. Or that it's been 4 months since his father died, so there's a 2-month span between Act 1 and Act 2. And he has been trying on different types of insanity, right? People describe him as melancholy and sad and all sorts of things. If we go back to Act 2, Scene 1, he does the mute crazy act where he walks into Ophelia's room and he's got his shirt unbuttoned and his tights are all dirty and around his ankles, and he looks pale as a ghost, and his knees are knocking, and he just reaches out and touches Ophelia, tries to touch her face, and then does the creepy keep look at her but turn and leave thing that she describes. So there's that type of creepy insane. When he's with Polonius, right, he pretends, first of all, not to know who he is, so kind of the almost schizophrenic type of insanity with Polonius, and engages in a lot of wordplay that is meant to insult Polonius, because he clearly does not like Polonius. And then with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, he starts fine, right? They're old friends, they're joking back and forth, they're having a good time, but then Hamlet suspects that they're not there just to hang out, right? And he is correct in that. And so he tells them that, ever since my father's death, I've just been really, really depressed. And I don't know why, and it's just how I am. right? And it's an aggressive type of insanity, right? He keeps harping on them. Why are you here? Why are you here, right? So he tries on different types of insanity for different types of people. And we don't know yet if that's an active choice or if it depends on the person. So it's kind of a touch and go type of thing. Like, okay, with this person, this blanket idea of antidisposition, of insanity, is this, it would be like this with one person. So is it, he's one way with Ophelia, he's one way with, so we don't know yet, but we know that he hasn't been consistently insane throughout the play. Before we get into Hamlet's soliloquy at the end, the Rogan peasant slave soliloquy, the relationship between Hamlet and Ophelia is difficult for us to interpret and comment on from a modern point of view, because Hamlet, and through Hamlet by extension the play itself, is deeply misogynistic. Gertrude and Ophelia have they are as much a part of this plot as any other character involved, yet we have seen them the least of anybody. We've seen Claudius more than Gertrude. We've seen Claudius more than Ophelia. We've seen Marcellus as much as we've seen Ophelia at this point, and Marcellus has nothing to do with the plot. But what's disturbing is when Hamlet is speaking about women, whether it be his mother, his lover, or women in general, he has a deep, deep disdain in his tone. And from a modern point of view, we can identify that as he is misogynistic, therefore he has, it's a toxic relationship between he and Ophelia, where Ophelia is almost like, it's either too naive to see that Hamlet is abusive and really doesn't love her, or there's something about her that has given up or doesn't care, so that she can be with this guy that in Act 3, when she talks about him, he's like the best, right? So like this veil is over her eyes, and she can't see that she's being abused, which I guess is naivety, but so in a modern context, that's what we see. But then, if we're thinking, 13th century or 16th century when the play was written, the language that Hamlet uses when talking about women would not be uncommon, right? It wouldn't be uncommon for somebody who isn't actively pursuing a woman at a time. So it's difficult from our point of view to analyze the nature of this relationship, because he says things to like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they make sex jokes, and it's this idea of boys being boys, which isn't okay in a modern sense, and truthfully it wasn't okay then, but at the time it was seen as okay. It was just boys being boys, right? Making dirty jokes about women, ha ha ha. But even in the Rogan peasant slave soliloquy, you're going to see, we're going to talk about how, like, at the end of his bashing on himself, the like deepest insult he can give himself is to compare himself to a whore, and call himself a whore because, well, whores have filthy mouths and all they do is talk, right? And they do terrible things and they talk dirty. Well, it's not just women who do that. Men do that too. Men do terrible things and have filthy mouths, right? We don't say you've got a mouth like a whore. We say you got a mouth like a sailor when we're talking about somebody who, curses and uses a lot of obscene language. So the misogyny is a problem, is what I'm trying to say. And so if you are analyzing their relationship, you're going to have a difficult time, because from a modern point of view, we are going to see it as a toxic relationship where he doesn't really love or respect Ophelia, not only because he plays these insanity games with her as well as the men in the castle, but because he also has all these other comments about women that show that he doesn't respect women. So it's going to be difficult, but if you can put the modern sensibility of misogyny and toxic masculinity aside, there's a good chance you're going to come up with a different interpretation. So don't be afraid to say that, yes, Hamlet truly does love Ophelia, but he loves his father more, or something like that. Don't be afraid to say that, just because in a modern context it's gauche. Because unless you're specifically being asked to analyze it from a feminist or a modernist point of view, we kind of have to put that aside and go straight with the text. Okay, so that's what I'm saying, is don't be afraid to defend the love between Hamlet and Ophelia, if that's what you truly find or want to prove. Okay, so let's put misogyny aside. Let's talk about rogue and peasant slave. This is either the second or third soliloquy, depending if the one in Act 1, Scene 5, after the ghost exits and before Marcellus and Horatio show back up, if you count that one as one of his soliloquies or not. There's a little bit of a timing problem with this soliloquy, in that he has already set up his plot of the Murder of Gonzago play. He's already asked the player to do this speech in the play so that, he can trap the king. But then that's already been established, but then in the soliloquy, he has this idea. There's a change that we'll talk about where it seems like he just came up with this idea. So there's a timing problem in the play, and this is stagecraft, in that it would be weird to have these two separate soliloquies that go well together and really define like his declining his actual grip on reality and how he feels about himself, with this change of, oh, I've got it. It would be weird to break that up. It goes well together. So stagecraft-wise, it makes sense, but if we step back and look at the chronological order of this play, it's a non sequitur. He's already come up with the plot, and then he comes up with the plot. So that's difficult, but we're going to put that aside and look specifically at the play in terms of characterization. And Hamlet does his own comparative analysis, for those of you who are language arts students. He compares himself to another character in the play, right? The actor who was performing the scene from a play where he was declaring his love for Hecuba, goddess of the moon. And, the actor, the player, is able to produce tears and cry, right? To feel these deep emotions, using emotional recall, those of you who are theater people, emotional recall in order to play the truth of the scene. Even in a place where all he's asked to do is, hey, do that speech, that one that we all love, right? But he's able to do that. He's so in touch with the character, he feels the emotions that he's able to reproduce, tears and whatever else on stage in front of these people. And Hamlet is saying, how can that guy do that with somebody that, number one, doesn't exist, and number two, he's never met, and number three, is not in a relationship with? How can he do that, and I cannot do anything for my father? Again, it's been 2 months since he heard from the ghost telling him that, do this, get vengeance for me, never forget. I'm screwing up that line, right? Remember me, remember me. It's been 2 months since that, and he's done nothing except run around and act a little goofy, right? People think, well, there's something wrong with him. We're not quite sure what it is. So he's not like insane enough to make people like really, but it's enough that Claudius has brought in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to see what's going on. Polonius wants to set up this setup and use his daughter as bait. You know, he's run around and acted crazy, and people don't know why. And so there are plots to figure it out, but it hasn't gotten to the point where it's led to any action. Hamlet has done nothing in this play, right? If we think about the 5 ways that authors characterize characters for us, we have no action short of he goes to see the ghost. That's really all he has done so far in the play. And that's what he's commenting on. Here's an actor who's able to reproduce these emotions, and it seems like he would do anything for Hecuba, who is nothing to him, nor he to Hecuba, right? But he who has, you know, this purpose to revenge his dead father has done nothing. And then he goes into a series of insults about himself, and this is where it gets interesting and where that misogyny comes in, right? So he starts by just, what does he say? He just calls himself dull and muddy-mettled, so he describes himself as a dummy. I'm just kind of a dummy. John a dream, so I'm a daydreamer. Unpregnant in my cause, so I haven't really developed anything yet, and can say nothing, no, not for a king upon whose property and most dead. And here's where it starts to change. Am I a coward? Hamlet is a play of questions. Opens with a question, ends with a question. And here we have a series of questions that Hamlet asks himself, right? You know, am I a coward? Am I an idiot who lets people, you know, pluck off my beard and do nothing? Who does this to me, right? He asks himself all these questions and is challenging his manhood, essentially, saying, you are nothing, you are not a man, and you are not a good son, you're not a responsible son. This is not how a king acts. Now, I'm not going to get into the problem of old versus new. You can go back to the scene where he talks about how, you know, the Danes, when they celebrate, it's too loud and raucous, and maybe people shouldn't be such drunk bastards, right? So this is also a development in the psychological and emotional standing of a new generation, but that's college level stuff. If you want the college level stuff, leave me a message and I'll do a separate video. But for this one, right, he is basically saying, I am not a man, and I am a terrible son. And he goes through this series of insults. Am I a coward? Am I weak? Right? And he eventually, calls himself a villain. And not only calls himself a villain, bloody body villain, he then goes into remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. So it's one thing to be a villain. It's one thing to be a remorseless villain. It's another thing to be a remorseless, treacherous villain. And I think you see where I'm going. He just heaps and heaps and heaps on himself. This is seemingly the low point for Hamlet. Things are going to start to get better for him, but this is the low point where he has zero self-esteem, and he punctuates it by comparing himself to a whore. And we've talked about the problem with that, right? But then he has the change. Foe, a scullion fie upon it, foe, about my brains, right? I have to think. And then he comes up with the plot, right? That he's going to get these actors to reenact his father's death on stage in the form of a play and see if Claudius reacts, because he's heard it said that if people see their guilt played out on stage, then they will react negatively, right? So that's his plot. The play is the thing wherein I'll capture the conscience of the king, right? So this is a change. And even then, even in there, he's still unsure of himself. The spirit that I have seen may be the devil. He's talking about the ghost of his father. And the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape. Yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. So he is acknowledging that weakness, right, and that sadness that he has, his inability to act. And he is like, I need to put that aside. Let's get to work. First things first. Let's do this. I need to make sure that Claudius is guilty. So here's the plot I'm going to do, and then from there I'll go, right? I'll know that I have to get revenge because I'll know that the ghost is true. It took him 2 months to get to this point. Not to belabor that point, but it took him 2 months to get here. But it's almost like some sort of recovery program, right? Or therapy where you have to identify, name, and acknowledge the problem before you can start to work on it. And here, instead of just insulting himself, calling himself an ass, calling himself a villain, calling himself a whore, he names the problem. I am weak, I am melancholy, and from there he can start, he can start to heal, right? And we can set up another session for next week. Our time here is done, type of thing. So, that's where we are with Hamlet. He hits rock bottom. All he's done is sit around in misery. It gets to the point where he's so upset that he just berates himself and calls himself names and has such low self-esteem that there's no place for him to go but up. And there's this change where he comes up with the plot, he acknowledges his problem, and now he's ready to move forward. There we go. I think that's all I wanted to talk about in Act 2. Thank you for watching. Act 3 will come out soon, as well as 4 and 5. For those of you who are not in one of my classes actively, if there are any other works of literature you'd like me to analyze, we'll have plenty this year. But if there's anything specifically you'd like me to help you out with, leave me a comment, send me a message, and I'll be more than happy to do that. Be sure to rate and subscribe. Ding! I just wanted to say that because everyone says that. All right, bye everybody.